even when it's cloudy.
In the business, there's a dashboard so people can see your
Oh, I guess I have actual. Oh, I did what you did.
Yeah, I don't want to
So that's how.
huddle for 2 minutes or at least exchange information so we can set up.
All right. We have sound.
Things look quiet.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, all right. There we go. My name is Grant Irvin. I serve as the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Pittsburgh. And I got to tell you, I'm really excited to be looking at people, not pixels. So this is a real special day for everyone, I think, in terms of, I was just telling the team from Acrobatique and Rhonda that I think this is the first in-person event in Pittsburgh. I don't know if that's like categorized. So yeah, let's give ourselves a round of applause. It's been a long time since we've been together in person, and so super gracious for that and thankful. Thankful for the group of panelists and our moderator here today to join us to take this big step for us. Before we get started, my role here is just to serve as a little bit of an MC and a color commentator. And before we kind of dive into the program, I just want to thank all of you for your attendance today, but also thank the team from Earth Day Pittsburgh and Acrobatique, and Rhonda and her team for helping to make this all possible. And in addition to that, also thank our sponsors. There's a ton that you'll see in your programs. I just want to note kind of our highline sponsors: Duquesne Light Company, UPMC Health Plan, Pitt Ohio Express. Also, I want to thank the fabulous team here from the Fairmont for their capacity in helping us bring together this great event. And then there are tons of sponsors that have helped bring together the Earth Day Pittsburgh event. This is really a testament, I think, of the community here in Pittsburgh and all of you for your dedication to sustainability. We were talking, a couple of us, a little bit earlier about Earth Day Pittsburgh and kind of the trajectory that we have seen this over the last 5 or 6 years. And I got to tell you that this list of sponsors was not this big 5 years ago, so it continues to grow. Thank you to all of you for your support. With that, I'd like to introduce Bill Flanagan from the Allegheny Conference. Bill is going to be our moderator today and going to be guiding us. We were able to herd the cats up here of all these great sustainability professionals. And so, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you and the team here.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much, and it's also great to be here with everybody. It is amazing to see real life faces instead of masks, and to see you in person instead of on a matrix screen and in some sort of a Zoom call, which is how we did it last year, actually. Although when we did this event in the fall, we had to cancel the original one that was planned in the spring. When we did it in the fall, we did it from the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University, and there were a few of us in the studio, and then everybody else obviously was out there in Zoom world somewhere. So it's fun to be able to see life slowly beginning to return to normal, and all of us kind of feeling our way along as we figure out how to resume our normal activities. It's great to be able to participate in this event again, and it has grown wonderfully over the past several years. I was involved about a decade ago when the United Nations designated Pittsburgh the North American host city for World Environment Day. I think it was around 2010 or 2011. And it kind of helped to really focus attention on what was beginning to happen here in Pittsburgh related to sustainability and the environment. I think it was the first time I ever heard the term UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, was kind of at that time. And they were all very new to people, and I've seen in more and more companies over the past decade or so that they're getting baked in a little more. At least people know what they are, and there's an awareness that certainly didn't exist as recently as a decade ago, and that's in large part because of the work all of you are doing. And just keeping at it and building awareness and showing value. And I think that's what we hope to hear about today. Obviously, we have a wonderful panel here, and we can talk about various organizations and their journey towards sustainability, but especially the business case and the value they're beginning to see generated for their organizations as a result of all the hard work they've put into this effort. So hopefully we'll get to hear about that from all of our panelists. The way this is going to work, I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and I'm going to start at the far end and work our way down here, to talk a little bit about their organization, what they do, their space in this space, what they're working on right now, a little bit of maybe the successes they're seeing, and what's got them excited too. And so I'll ask each of our panelists to take 5 minutes or so to kind of give us that kind of an overview. Grant and I reserve the opportunity to follow up with a question after each of the panel if we want to. But the hope would be to go right down the panel, and CB, since we have our professor here at this end, he can be listening to the class and sort of sum up what he's hearing and maybe what it tells us globally about where we are as a community and where we need to go. And after that, we'll open it up for a discussion and Q&A. And I'm telling, because I didn't get a chance to talk to all the panelists individually, the hope would be this is not going to be a real stiff Q&A. I would love it if a panelist asks another panelist a question about something they say. And we will have a roving microphone if we need it, so if anybody in the audience with the Q&A part wants to ask a question or offer an observation about what they've heard, we would welcome that. And then I'm going to put Grant on the spot at the end to offer some perspective and analysis. We joke about this being like the Sunday NFL game, and I'm Jim Nance, and he's Tony Romo, and he'll be up here with his telestrator at the end.
Won 18 million.
He wishes that he was Tony Romo, right? But he'll be up with his telestrator at the end as we wrap things up. And we promise to wind down about 9:45 and get everybody out of here by 10 o'clock as planned. And I'm not going to bother to read the long introductions to our panel because that would just take all the time. There wouldn't be time for it to hear from anybody. They're in your program, so you can just refer to the program to learn a little bit more about the individual and their organization. But I would like each of them to talk a little bit more about what they're doing in this space and kind of what progress they think they are making, we are making, and how this is unfolding. And I'm going to start, as I said, at the end of the panel with Dr. Robert Schroef, who is the Murren Chair of Global Competitiveness at Duquesne University, and where he also runs the MBA Sustainable Business Practices program. Dr. Schroef.
Thank you. And thank you for having me today. And trying to introduce what we do, there's a lot, right? So I'm involved in an MBA in Sustainability program. We are the #1 ranked program in the United States by the Corporate Knights for doing this. That means we've been beating out places like Harvard, MIT, Cornell, NYU, Stanford, and that list goes on. How do we do that? We integrate sustainability and live projects into every curriculum, every semester, as a core requirement for the curriculum. So in that vein, we've completed over 200 live consulting projects now with multinational corporations, small and medium enterprises, government, most everybody on this panel, I think, in some way, and some of you in the audience. And this is the way in which we try to bring value to the region in solving real sustainability problems. So this is what I want to do with our MBA students, and I offer us up as a resource to you. We're here to help. If you have a problem that you think a team of MBAs could help give you a fresh perspective on, we'd love to be that resource to try and do that with you, and to try to also bring other stakeholders to the table to make it a reality and not just an academic exercise. That's the last thing I want to do, is to be involved in a chalk and talk section about what Pittsburgh should be doing in terms of this Marshall Plan. When I look at the size of it and what's been proposed with this, it's 1% of our annual budget in the country is what we're asking for. It's $60 billion, right? 1%. What can we do with 1%? And think about that and how we might align resources, get everyone on the same page for a set of goals, and whether the UN SDGs, as Grant mentioned, or other goals, let's put together the biggest thing that has ever been done, right, in terms of investments in the SDGs in this region, in these 3 states. And this program and what we're doing at the university are really a resource to try to help move those things along and to find the value proposition that really integrates social and environmental performance into an integrated bottom line, and not a myopic focus on only profits. So with that, I doubt I hit 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, I didn't get, so let's take a couple more minutes. So give us for instance, describe one of these projects. What did you go accomplish? How do you engage? How does one of these unfold?
All right, so within a 14-week time frame for this, we typically set up a kickoff meeting with our project partners, mid-project update, weekly updates from the teams. Some of our team members are in the audience, and I'm smiling. Yeah, looking around. So we try to do this in a way where we bring a different value proposition. That value proposition at no cost to our project partners has been upwards of $40 million in return for the potential that they provide in terms of their solution set. And it's usually a set of opportunities as solutions, and not one. I think we also propose scenarios and scenario planning for our project partners to think about not just one solution, because tomorrow something's going to change, right? Somebody didn't invest in the software they needed to protect an infrastructure resource, and now we're vulnerable, and we have to pivot to something different. So we set up scenarios for clients to think about what the future could be and try to align resources and decision making to then meet those objectives. So with multinational companies, we've been approached by whole countries. I'm working with countries now on greenhouse gas level emission inventories, recovery from hurricanes, trying to be resilient countries in doing this, and understand that the better we measure something, especially like greenhouse gas emissions, CO2, and things like air quality, the better we'll get at understanding what our opportunities really are and not be reactive to problems, but instead be a proactive and in a leadership opportunity to have the rest of the world kind of point to us to say, oh, maybe it's what they did with the Marshall Plan or what's happening in the Pittsburgh region that we should also be doing, because proof of concept's there. We know that a lot of this stuff has already been proven. There's a business case behind it. I'm involved in high performance buildings research, supply chain management, some of the stuff we do with indoor air quality inside buildings, like this one. We know that the financial returns are already good to begin with. When we include environmental impacts avoided, it gets that much better. And when we look at the human health and productivity impacts, it's 10 times better than the financials to begin with. But yet we have the hardest time measuring that. So we're also here to try to help measure those intangibles, because even a publicly traded firm only has about 80%, or I should say 20% of its real value captured in the accounting rules and what we see in a stock price. The other 80% is out there for us to better understand, to tell stories about, and to be the employers of choice, right? To have people want to come and work for us as we claw our way out of this pandemic and create a different future for this region. So these are the types of things we work on. We've done over 200 live consulting projects to date. No two have been the same. And we're looking forward to our next one, if it's with you.
And are you seeing increasing interest in recent years as you move forward? Or is it easier to find clients, or is there more interest in what you have to offer?
Yeah, I think it is becoming easier. We can't take on as many clients as we'd like to have, just because we have limited capacity with the amount of teams that we have working on individual projects. And I think there's much more focus now. Environmental outputs have been there since 1970 in terms of measurement and management and the green stuff. And now it's really moving, especially over this last year, to the social space and understanding the social dynamics of sustainability. And that realizing publicly traded firms already have 400 to 700 environmental and social performance metrics assessed to them and their supply chain members. And they might not even know it. And it's how to unravel and better understand the social dynamic that I think is getting a lot more traction.
I would think it could be so almost overwhelming. How do you get over that hump of thinking, oh my, it's such a big challenge. I'm not even going to deal with it. I'm just going to try to focus on payroll.
Yeah, I think in scenario planning, you have to work with your management team. You have to work with your decision makers and leaders, policy makers, others that are at this table, right? And figure out what are the most important or critical aspects of moving something forward. Resources is always going to be part of it, right? When someone sees a $60 billion price tag per year, there's going to be some sticker shock. But if we think about 10 times that coming back to us in terms of returns, that's the case we need to make to figure out what are the most critical opportunities for us to measure. They're going to be hard. They're going to be messy. They're not going to be straightforward. Maybe GAAP doesn't already have a rule for it, but SASB might, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, SASB. And we can start looking at things differently than we've looked in the past, because I think too often we're someone who's been out drinking too much at night. We lost our car keys and we're looking underneath the street light for the car keys because it's the lit spot. Everything else is in darkness around us. We don't know where those car keys might be, but once we illuminate everything else around us, that's the environmental impact, that's the social impact, all this stuff we've had a hard time really trying to figure out how to get our hands around. And then we'll probably find those keys somewhere. And they'll start a new vehicle, it could be electrified, it'll move us down the road faster, 90% better in terms of energy, in terms of reduced cost for that vehicle if it's going to be electric versus combustion. And we'll find all these new things that we didn't find before because we've only been looking in that one spot we can shine a light on. So hopefully opportunities like this venue and others in the future, these panelists and all of you provide that network of ways to think about and illuminate something that we just haven't been able to get to before because we've been too focused on quarterly profits and moving on down the road to the next one and responding to something that may be negative. And here's our positive opportunity to think big.
Excellent. Well, speaking of lit spots to find our car keys to drive our electric car, it's fortunate we actually have somebody from Duquesne Light as next up as one of our panelists. Yeah. Elizabeth Cook is General Manager of Advanced Grid Solutions for Duquesne Light Company to tell us a little bit about what you all are working on in your own journey in this space.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I feel like I should start where I started my career, just to kind of give a perspective of what I'm giving to Duquesne Light and to this area of knowledge. So I actually worked for Mitsubishi Electric, and right out of school, I was worked with the transmission system mostly, power systems engineer. So I run around the country doing studies for the electrical grid and really understanding the implications of all this new technology. And I remember, 17 years ago, a big hot topic was wind. I remember sitting in the planning rooms of the California utilities and all of the planners. This wind's not going to work. It's not going to be able to be introduced to the grid. And so I was the one studying how to interact with the wind and the grid. Then came solar, and then quickly my career with Mitsubishi Electric had me on the road quite often. And I just shout out to John Faserba. He was my coach, and he more or less provided the power of passion to me. It's the lifeline of our lives, right? So when I came to Duquesne Light, I was the transmission planning manager. And what I did is ultimately assess the grid that we have today. And that's the high voltage system, the big towers outside on the highways, really coming from the large generation plants, one-way power flow to distribute to the distribution side. I was there for a year, and quite frankly, I started noticing a lot of interaction with the distribution grid, right? Edge technology. We have our solar panels, we have the batteries, we have smaller wind, and really interacting with the edge of the grid. And what I saw from inside Duquesne Light now as a planner is how do we effectively transition and transform as a utility to be an avenue to all these technologies than a hindrance. So over my time, I actually just recently got this new position, Advanced Grid Solutions, and the ideology behind it is I'm working with external and internal stakeholders to really change the way we're thinking and embracing that edge technology, such as all the sustainability efforts. How is our customers becoming active? How do they want to utilize energy? How do they see energy? And then how can we play a role in really leaning in instead of kind of being that obstinate that typical electric utilities have been seen as over the last 100-some years. Because as everyone knows, the grid, and especially our grid, the city of Westinghouse, was 140 years ago. And the technology that was evolved for the first 70, 80 years was all about getting bigger and more efficient to serve masses of people, right? We electrified rural America in the 1930s. We connected the large grid, and now we have a grid too big to fail. How do we break that grid back down and create resiliency hubs, create that reliability, create that ability for the flexibility to happen down here in the home side? So it's flipping it on the head. We're kind of going back to our roots. And if you think of also in the 1970s, we reached that efficiency factor, we reached the capacity, and innovation stopped in the electricity sector. We all just grounded our roots in 1800 technology, electromagnetic induction, massive spinning machines, and that's what we held to. And everything that we put on the grid was designed to those standards that were created in the early 1900s. So now we have all of this new innovation and technology popping up, and I see my part is how do we understand the controls? How do we understand that intermittency of these new clean technologies that are connecting the grid? How does the grid maintain its safety for the public and those that work on it? How does it maintain reliability to all that they serve? Because not everyone's going to have generation at the edge of the grid. And really, how do we make it and continue to make it affordable to all? So it's a large lift, and it's quite exciting. And I think this area is something that I've, have my own personal passion to. Air quality, green roofs, how do we use the resources around us to really reduce our energy burden so that we can electrify the grid even more, but also make it cleaner while we do it. So that was a mouthful. But.
Yeah, well, and that's a big challenge. I mean, the grid is big, right? And there's a lot of electrons moving all the time. When you think about the grid of the future, the one you're working on, realistically, how long is it going to take us to get there? Are we talking end of the decade? Are we talking decades? I mean, what's this transition going to look like?
Yeah, I think just being an activist to changing our mindset, it's going to take multiple years. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of our infrastructure is buried, it's overhead, it's older, it costs a lot of money to replace. So it's not about like abandoning it, it's transforming it. So, but doing it in partnership with our active customers. So I think, as long as everyone is aware and working, collaborating instead of really competing for these electrons, really like how do we use the assets that are here to really transform us into the future? I mean, I think it's just a mindset that we take into the future instead of needing to change it, in a decade or two. I mean, granted, we have our goals, 2030 and 2050, but that also can, help us expedite our processes.
It's a journey rather than a snap your fingers and selling the destinations here. I know one of my colleagues has an electric car, and she was telling me yesterday, I love my electric car. It's great, but just try to really live with an electric car and live your life and travel where you need to go and do anything. And she says it's a challenge because we don't have the charging stations, the infrastructure just isn't there yet. So is that are those the kinds of things you look at as well?
Right, so thinking about electric vehicle infrastructure, right? So there's a lot of talk that the grid will not be able to handle this large penetration of electric vehicles. So the idea is that collaboration, right? Identifying where do these charging stations go with the grid that we have today, and then where do we need to plan for the future. So it has to be done together and then evolve. So, that's kind of one of my positions is like, let's identify who's putting in these large fleets, who's putting in the charging stations so that we can adequately plan, do scenario planning to really kind of understand, is this grid prepared? And if not, what do we need to do to prepare it? And then it's, instead of like rush, we got to go fix the grid real quick and maybe more efficient. So if you have that collaboration between those that are developing these sites and the grid that they're going to use, I think there's a transition that can be made. And doing it in smaller, I feel like a benefit of Duquesne Light is that we are a 2-county utility, right? We're serving Allegheny and Beaver County. So we have that agility, we have that flexibility to really kind of evolve and create these collaborative partnerships to drive and then share to other cities and areas of the grid. So. Yeah,
and Grant, I want to put you on the spot because you're on the government side of this and trying to see how this unfolds and all. Are you living this every day in terms of how this world is being developed?
Every day. What's kind of interesting, and maybe to tie our first two panelists together, so our effort, and I'm going to call it our journey into vehicle electrification, for example, started with one of Professor Stroop's classes. So we had 10 MBA students basically sit down with us, and I said, listen, we know that we need to electrify our fleet. Can you give us a little bit of an insight in terms of how to do that, what vehicles are available? And so they basically helped create the initial roadmap for our vehicle electrification plan, which is now, the city of Pittsburgh has, I'm proud to say, the largest electric fleet in Western Pennsylvania. So we have 40 EVs that are zipping around town right now with the ability to scale up again to like the infrastructure plan. We're looking to having 80 electric vehicles in our fleet, probably by the end of 2023. And so that's the first part of the equation. The second part of the equation is I get to meet Elizabeth, right? And so it's this idea of understanding how do you effectively install the infrastructure and match that infrastructure where you need it in order to support the needs of the customer. And that's that, I've put the note down when she talked about, the edge of the grid. It makes me think of about a Bruce Springsteen song, Darkness at the Edge of Town, right? And so like there is a darkness in that end of town right now because we don't know what we don't know. If you look at Pittsburgh's history, the first gas station in the United States was created in East Liberty. And in many cases, Elizabeth and I are looking right now at creating the first electric vehicle hub charging station at 2nd Avenue. And that's going to require us to re-engineer the grid, the configuration. We're both fighting with PennDOT, our internal people, to kind of think about how do we move lines and wires to put a plug in a car. And so we're really at that very first stages of a transformation in terms of what we're going to see in terms of our mobility sector.
Fascinating. Well, talking about transitions and transformations within organizations, that's what Jana Lake deals with every day as president of 3R Sustainability. Jenny, you want to tell us a little bit about what you all do and kind of what you're seeing evolving in this space?
Sure. Well, it is a very exciting space and a growing time right now. And I have to say, it's wonderful to be with all of you in person today. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. So 3R Sustainability helps organizations realize the business value of sustainability. And you do that by starting with your business strategy and your goals. So when we go in and work with our clients, we're really helping them figure out what are the most important environmental, social, governance impacts within their business, and how does that tie to their organization. And then we help them figure out what are the processes, the systems, the culture change, perhaps, that they need to make within their company to be able to realize that business value. So it's, we've seen just an enormous increase over the past, I would say probably 18 to 24 months, but the past 6 to 12 has been crazy. And it's because you're starting to see that market transformation. You're starting to see now the larger companies making commitments and then saying, okay, well, I realize I can't do this alone, and I'm responsible for more than just what's happening in my four walls. I'm looking now across my entire value chain, and I need to understand what is happening within my supply chain, all the way through what is happening, as my product or service is disposed. And I'm responsible for all of that, so I need to understand the impacts that has, environmental, social, and other. I need to understand the risks, the opportunities that presents, and I need to be looking at it in an entirely different way. So in some cases, we're working with, kind of the top of the food chain, the really large companies that are setting the aggressive, bold targets and saying, we want to be net zero by 2030, by 2050, pick a date. And then, then it's like, okay, well, now they turn to their teams and they say, okay, we'll go figure out how we're going to do that. And their teams are like, okay, well, but that also means our supply chain. So we need to understand what's happening in our supply chain. So, we're kind of also finding that there's a lot of interest in that next tier where they're receiving the customer requests that say, tell me what you're doing in this space, right? What kind of commitments have you made? How are you supporting our overall mission? And how are you going to help make a difference in the world? So we're finding that it truly is becoming a very circular economy. And a lot of it is because we have some leading companies. We also have some leading investors and employees and customers and others that are really driving that kind of change. Expectations have gone up. They've gone way up. And people are realizing, and whether driven by pandemics or economies or any number of different situations, the interest level and awareness level is now to the point where when you talk sustainability with people, it used to be kind of that's handled over there. Let me point you to the right person. That's our sustainability person. That can't be the answer anymore. It has to be something where it's built into the culture, it's built into the operations, and it's built into the way that companies and individuals make decisions every day. That's how you realize the business value of sustainability. So we work with a lot of companies across the board. Like I said, some large ones from big tech and large kind of product and service types of companies we actually did a project last year with the Green Sports Alliance, working with sports teams and trying to figure out how to reopen their facilities and venues in a safe, healthy way. We have an entire engineering team, so we do a lot on the built environment. We help organizations calculate what is perhaps for the first time their greenhouse gas inventory, and then based on setting some targets, how do you achieve them? What kinds of changes do they need to make from an energy efficiency standpoint? What can they do to improve indoor air quality? What kinds of people programs do they need to have in place? So it's we're really seeing kind of across the board, just every company, every call is a different industry, a different size organization, sometimes public, sometimes private. It's really permeated the entire economy.
Yeah, and how do you incent people to go along with this? I would think in this space, great, the boss says we got to hit net zero by 20X. Great, thanks, boss. How do you get people inside organizations to truly embrace this and to want to make it happen? Are there any tricks out there that you've observed?
Well, a lot of it does come from customers or leaders, or someone is kind of pushing this, right? So it's if we want to keep this customer, we need to be able to not only answer their questionnaire, but truly become a partner with them and show them what we're doing to create that change. And then, I think internally people really want to make a difference. People get excited about having a purpose. And so it does become that situation where people within the company not only embrace this, but drive it. they want to be a part of the solution. They want to be the partner with, internally and with the customers. So I've actually found that it's really easy to get some of that culture change, because culture change starts with behaviors, and behaviors come from inside. So if you want to be part of that solution, and if you want to drive toward, a better society, a better world, a better environment, then, there are plenty of opportunities right now to be able to do that.
And related to that, I can see inside one of these great big leading companies, the folks are going to go along with it, right? They need a job. They hopefully have some passion for this. But when you go down the supply chain, you quickly get to smaller organizations that don't have a sustainability officer. They lack capacity. Does it break down there? How do you manage that process to make sure your whole supply chain can support an effort like this?
I think it's this whole market and system transformation that's happening. Customers become increasingly important when you're smaller. So from an internal standpoint, they see the external drive, and they understand that internally they need to be able to embrace that change. What our job is to build that capability and capacity internally. So as we do something, we're partnering with those small companies to say, okay, these are the steps that we need to go through, right? You have the same kinds of issues and opportunities, perhaps on a smaller scale, but sometimes that means it's even more important to your business to address that. So they end up really not only going along with it, but truly embracing it. And I found some very innovative people within very small companies. And sometimes there's maybe a match there, right? Because in small companies, as you know, I lead a small company. Everybody has to roll up their sleeves and make things happen, right? It's not that person's job or that person's job. Everybody has to do it. So within a small company, it's kind of like, all right, this is the occasion that I'm going to rise to. And they come up with the most innovative solutions and really end up driving things much further than potentially they could have if not given that opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder, Grant, at the city, do you see a lot of different capacity across your whole supplier network when you try to tackle these types of challenges?
It really does vary. I mean, one of the things that's been interesting that we've seen, just to talk a little bit about two things, a space that Jan is very familiar with, which is ESG impact. And so, this idea of environmental social governance and the connection to it, we've seen as we have started to model ESG in our purchasing habits, that those suppliers start to change. And so as a result, for example, we developed an ESG policy for our pension fund as a model to effectively first divest our pension fund from fossil fuel companies, but also guns and ammo manufacturers, for-profit prisons. And we use the SDG lens as the way to apply that. And what we started to see is those financial companies and our financial advisors starting to shift the types of products that they were offering to us. Same thing with an electrical supply contract that we had. We called for an ESG reporting mechanism to be supplied as part of the tender offer that they provided, and they met it. So 5 of the 6 respondents put forth that type of response to our proposal, and the one that didn't, we realized that they were not a fit, and so it allowed us to start to focus in on what those investors are. Same thing with smaller suppliers. We've seen that innovation step forward on women's-owned businesses, minority women-owned businesses, step forward and be able to provide those services because they do have the agility to do it.
Interesting. Shows to go you that a big customer can make a big difference well beyond their own business operations. Well, we started out spending a little bit of time on electricity, and of course you can get electrons lots of different places. You can spin up a dynamo using a waterfall and generate some. You can burn some coal, some natural gas or oil, and you can do it that way. You can put up a propeller and let the wind do it for you, or you can just take it in from the sun. And that's our next panelist is Greg Weeks from Solbridge Energy Advisors. And Greg, I wonder what you're seeing these days in the solar space and where it fits into this sustainable world we're trying to build.
First off, I love your segues. I am a partner in a independent solar energy consulting firm here in Pittsburgh. First thing that we always say to everyone, yes, solar works in Western Pennsylvania. It works everywhere. It's the greatest myth that's still out there. to go along with the theme that everyone is saying here, the sustainability, the commitment, the investment that people should look towards our future, towards reliability, security, infrastructure. It's a key thing. It's a key part of what we see in the future. I like the collaborative nature that Elizabeth was talking about with Duquesne Light and how incorporating various technologies to provide a more secure future, better environment, better air quality, health quality. SoulBridge operates in this market to work with, change the dynamics a little bit. We don't represent any one company, so we're representing the consumers and the decision makers that are looking to go solar. We think that we're probably the only company that exists in this paradigm in this region. We help understand the technical capabilities, the possibilities of people that want to go solar. Help to understand the financial involvement, investment that's going to be required. And I do stress that word. It is an investment, and it's a long-term return. And that's the way we have to start looking at a lot of our infrastructure upgrades right now, is what do we have to do? Not just, what could we get instantaneous return tomorrow? What can we do to invest in our grid? And we can do this just with a short view, like a homeowner going solar. What can we do on our home? We can also look at it from a commercial perspective. Businesses are starting to have to respond to their own supply chain demands and their own priorities that they want to establish as far as sustainable practices. One of the biggest impacts has to go with energy. Where's their energy? How's it being managed? Where's it being sourced? How reliable is it? Incorporating battery technology to provide security, help for business security, but also for enhancement on the power grid with combinations of solar and battery, and how reliable that could enhance the grid. So we help with the assessments for commercial, for homeowners, municipalities, churches, everyone that is looking to go solar right now. That's our role. That's our place in the community. Financing solar is a little bit of a challenge in some areas, but here again, I look beyond the initial hurdle and the initial dollar price and say, what is this investment turn long term? Pennsylvania as a whole is steady in its growth in solar. Not an explosive market, let's say like we might see in a state like New Jersey, Massachusetts, two states that are geographically very small compared to Pennsylvania, but are both in the top 10 as far as the amount of solar installed. And we're about in the middle of the road as far as the country is concerned. Do want to say a little props for Allegheny County. We're near the top of the state for the amount of solar that's installed. We do have about 2,600 solar installations, which is third in the state. So that's good. We're moving forward. Some of our notable installations as a community. You might be aware of the Mill 19 down on Hazelwood Green, the largest single slope roof installation in the country. Just it's long, it's big. We're having other notable projects, microgrid development out at the airport, combination of natural gas and solar. I know we've had a lot of microgrid development with an example with our Pitt, Ohio. So it's an example of how the energy infrastructure can evolve. And incorporating solar is bringing our generation down to the local level, how we want to personally manage it. Local could be homes, local could be municipalities, cities, energy, security management, emergency management if we have bad storms, grids that are typically knocked down from ice storms, or that we have the ability to incorporate locally sourced solar, battery technology. So SolarBridge works with homeowners to help evaluate technical, financial, funding strategies, bringing in the contractors to actually complete the projects. And we're working with a number of, a wide variety right now. One that we cannot mention right now, we were hoping to be at a point that we can announce it today, but it's a pretty large retail project that we'd like to see happen.
Yeah, Greg, I wonder, you talk a little bit about batteries. So, how big a challenge is storage, and what has to happen in that space for solar to realize its full potential?
Right now, it's price point. It really is. Technologically, we're getting to the point to where you can see a lot of, especially on a larger scale, utility scale. I think where you're seeing in certain parts of the country, you're seeing a lot of utility large-scale battery operations incorporated with grid management to help reduce maybe the carbon footprint of what we call peaker plants that are out there that are needed on certain peak high demand days of the year. Batteries can sit there and not have to be running on a low level capacity at all times. That's building up their carbon footprint, just even whether or not it's being utilized. On a bringing that down on a smaller scale, you see more and more batteries being implemented on residential, small businesses, but it is a price point situation right now that we're just not quite there yet. In a state that's really much more advanced in development of solar and battery technology, California, you see software being developed where communities as a whole, let's say everyone here had solar and battery technology, and you could, and you're living in a close neighborhood, utilities can actually have software that can interact with homeowners as a group to manage the grid through the combination of solar and battery technology and software. That could be the future applications as we see solar, battery, and the collaborative nature with utilities.
Interesting. And well, encouraging to know that the technology is getting there. It's like anything else. You got to get the cost down to where it becomes practical and commercial for everybody. You mentioned the microgrid work that Pitt, Ohio has been doing, and I think it's a good opportunity to make that transition. got to hear Justine before we started talking a little bit about the holy grail of electric trucks and how far you are at that, on that path as well. So Justine Rosso is the Director of Sustainability and Business Intelligence for Pitt, Ohio. Tell us about what you all are working on.
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and coming out and showing your faces again. So for those who don't know, Pitt, Ohio, we move freight. We're a freight transportation company. And I always like to start and joke around that no one thinks of a tractor trailer going down the Pennsylvania Turnpike as sustainable. You probably think the opposite, right? So I think with a culture of innovation and experimentation and learning, our owner and president, Chuck Hamill, challenged us to develop a core competency in sustainability. And we really have three objectives. We talk about the 3 Ps. Our purpose is delivering that freight, delighting our customers, making sure that the freight is there on time and intact. And just to give you some perspective on, what's happening post-pandemic, when we saw the shutdowns, our business slowed down too, but I follow the Purchasers Management Index, and it's been very robust. The freight market has been really robust. We've also seen quite a few drivers opt out. So we are seeing the driver shortage that people have been talking about for years and years. So the transportation market is hot, and people need to get their goods moved. So it's not going away, is my short response to that. Freight is still being moved, and it has to get to its destination. Our second P is people, and really with sustainability, we were looking at how are we the employer of choice. So I just mentioned driver shortage. We have to have great employees to fulfill our purpose of giving that service. So we are looking for the best and the brightest, and people who are committed to providing excellent service. And we find sustainability is a way of differentiating ourselves as a workplace amongst our other carriers. And then finally, the last P is planet, and we do some very, very exciting things here that you would not think of. It's really about finding efficiencies. It's not just about the planet. People have to report a P&L, and it's really about how are we taking cost out of the system as we're also taking waste out of the system. And we've seen that extra benefit of now our carbon emissions are also being reduced. So we've talked about, you don't really think about a trucking company as having solar and wind turbine installations. Right now we have 3 solar installations. We have 2 wind stacks, wind turbine installations. We started with an experiment with a microgrid here in Pittsburgh at our Harmer facility. That has a storage about 70 kilowatts. And last year we did receive a patent on how do you take solar and wind and combine them into a DC power microgrid. We'll find not only the local generation helps reduce waste, but also direct current, not having to transfer that to alternating current also reduces waste. So we took that concept, that patent winning a concept, and we've actually repeated it in our new Cleveland facility out in Parma, Ohio, which I said 70 kilowatts. Well, now we're about at 1 megawatt of storage power, 8 wind stacks, wind turbines, about 1,500 solar panels, and with the goal of charging electric vehicles there. And what's really fascinating, it's easy for me to say that, but the amount of engineering that is going into that, the amount of innovation, the amount of partnerships. And I think, Jana, you mentioned about it being built into the culture. I gotta say, my role at Pitt, Ohio, just to kind of clarify, is I'm the data person. I gather all of the sustainability information, whether it's from our vehicles or from our buildings, and I publish a nice looking report. But what's really happening, we have a steering committee, and all of the work is really being done in our vehicle maintenance group, in our building maintenance group, in our operations. They are the ones that are finding opportunities for innovation, going to Chuck and saying, hey, I want to try this. The whole concept of microgrid came from our director of building maintenance, Jim Mogg, seeing someone at Pitt speak about it, and then saying, hey, do you think we should try this? We didn't have renewables at Harmer until that started underway. So it's really built into the culture. We're very lucky. It not only comes from the top, but it's also in the middle, and then it's in the front line as well. And then I also want to touch on the customer trends. So back in 2011, Chuck Hamill, who's the owner and president, was the one who first said the word sustainability. And everybody looked around and what does that mean? Oh, we're gonna put a green leaf on the website, and what does that mean? And I remember, first of all, by being data oriented, we were really able to find the materiality. You talked about what do you focus on? And we looked at it, it seems really, really basic to start, but we started with a pie chart. Dr. Shruv actually is the one who helped us build our carbon calculator, and we started with that first pie chart that showed 90% of our emissions come from the trucks. So really, we weren't even looking at the buildings. We were trying to figure out how do you run the trucks more efficiently. But luckily, again, Chuck's vision was, well, what if we had LEED certified buildings? And what if we, we had somebody look at the microgrid? So it really comes from all parts of the organization. I was talking about customers. So back in 2012, we bring customers in and we have these focus groups, and we talked about, we were so excited. We just started on this journey of sustainability, and what did they think of it? And they did not think much of it. They said that was very nice for you, Pitt, Ohio, and good for you, but that has no impact on my choice of carrier. And I will tell you, over the past 10 years, every year I see more and more. I see the vendor surveys. I see people asking the sustainability questions. I just filled out one yesterday for a pretty large medical devices company that had never asked for that information before. So I think part of the sustainability journey in the macro level is by sharing our stories, by sharing our wins, by sharing our losses. What didn't work? It really helps everyone learn a little bit more and figure out, hey, maybe I want to try this too. Maybe this will work. Hey, Pitt, Ohio, what did you learn? How did you go about it? Who did you work with? So I'm excited that people are here and more and more people are showing up, and that the story, I think with every iteration, is just getting more robust.
No, it's fascinating. I remember I was working for KDKA back in the late 90s when the community, actually the foundations, had this great idea that we should build a green convention center in Pittsburgh. And of course, nobody even knew what the heck a LEED certified green convention center was. And everybody, and of those who didn't, they were actually kind of opposed to it. Why are we wasting all this taxpayer dollar doing this green thing, just for a bunch of tree huggers? Why do we have to do this? And Visit Pittsburgh actually did a survey of their customers, of the people who would use a convention center, and said, oh, well, would it influence your decision to have a meeting in Pittsburgh if we had a green convention center? And what they got was a resounding no. Absolutely did not matter to their customers around 1999, 2000. They did the same survey about 10 years after the convention center was up and running and had sort of raised its profile as the greenest convention center in the world, and they found that almost 40% of their customers said it would be a tiebreaker in a decision about where to hold a meeting. So that was that journey over that first decade of the century, and then you talk about the switch kind of being thrown at Pitt, Ohio around 2011. That was on the heels of Bear bringing World Environment Day to Pittsburgh in 2010, and so it really is amazing how much has happened over the past 10 years to really affect the willingness of people to try this. And so with that, I'm going to turn to C.B. Bhattacharya from Pitt, from the Katz School of Business, where he's the chair in sustainability and ethics. You can tell us a little bit about your work in this space, but also kind of what you're thinking about what you've heard so far.
So I get 10 minutes, right?
You got about 5, C.B.
5 minutes for the summary, 5 minutes for the...
No, I would do 2.5 and 2.5 if you can.
Okay, you got it. So nice to see everyone in person. So I took a car service this morning. I had my son's high school graduation last night, so I was a bit groggy. And so I said, okay, I have not taken a car, like a Lyft or an Uber in over a year, so okay, today's the day. I'm gonna meet people in person. So, I'm used to the car coming in about 5 minutes, but the car came, it took 20 minutes for a car to come, so I was getting stressed. I've got to be on stage. And so guy says, oh, you're going somewhere, right? You have to be on time. I said, yeah, I'm in like 15 minutes and at the Fairmont, So it says, oh, what is this, what is this about? So I said sustainability. And so what's that? And then at one point I just said, I don't really know the details, but I just know there's a TV reporter who's waiting, to get the show started. So then he says, you've got to fix your hair then. And I'm like, what? What? I mean, why? So he seriously made me nervous that something was wrong. Anyway, I came and then I got a call. My trusted lieutenant here calling me at 8:28 saying, everybody's waiting for you to get the program started. Anyway, I digress, but it's so nice. And let me just try to tie up a few of the strands of thought here, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the center that I have the honor of directing at this point in time. So what I heard, and there's excitement in the air. Things are changing. I mean, that's for sure. We heard that in many conversations. But I want to take a step back to that Lyft driver's question, kind of, so what is sustainability? And sustainability really is leaving a world to our children that is better than the world that we inherited, right? So a very simple phrase: we do not inherit the world from our parents, we borrow it from our children. We do not inherit the world from our parents, we borrow it from our children. Indeed, my son graduated. I want him to have a good life. I mean, I don't want him to be in sweltering heat. Think about that, right? But in doing that, we have to come to the P's. The sustainability is multifaceted. It's multifaceted. It's not just environmental, right? So there's planet, of course, and we've heard a lot about the planet. But let us not forget people and the role of people. We cannot produce renewable energy or anything, without people, not to belittle computers and artificial intelligence and so on, but people are a precious resource. We cannot run an economy without profit, unless we want to go back to the days of barter, which may be a bit complicated. So people, planet, profit. These are the three legs of what we call the triple bottom line. And they are all interconnected. They're all interconnected. So we are talking about environmental issues, but what about talking about the people who are getting left behind because of climate change, right? The immigration that comes along with climate change. I mean, who's looking at that interface? That's also sustainability. So point number one I want to make is that sustainability is multifaceted. And this people, planet, profit, this triple bottom line is circumscribed by purpose. If we do not have purpose in a business, then we are not living in the 21st century. So, and what is purpose? Purpose is the answer to the question, why do we exist as a business? Why does Pitt, Ohio do what it does? And I've had very interesting conversations with Chuck Hamill that Justine referred to, CEO of Pitt, Ohio, on exactly that. Every business has to ask that question. And if the answer cannot be described in terms of a societal benefit that the business provides, then that business has no reason to exist. There has to be a societal benefit that the business is providing. A car company is providing mobility. They're providing mobility in a very good way. So purpose, without purpose, you need to have a sense of purpose. A business needs to have a sense of purpose to get off of the gates in terms of sustainability. So that's one thing that is a thread that's coming through down my side. Now, Professor Struve started the conversation by talking about how helpful he and his organization, Duquesne University, has been to businesses in the area and with the projects that they have done. Others folks talked about collaboration. So let me say one very, very important thing, another P, right? Partnerships. So without partnerships, we cannot have sustainability. We cannot be sustainable on our own. So collaboration is very much key. So, and what is important in these partnerships and in these collaborations is to put sustainability in the pre-competitive space. We do not compete on making a better world. That can't happen, right? We have to be able to, that's why we welcome both Duquesne University and the University of Pittsburgh having a center that does work on sustainability. Nothing wrong with that. We don't have to compete on that part. We can compete on execution, but we don't have to compete on the part of each of us being an agent of change. And all of you, everybody sitting here, is an agent of change. And you want to be using that sphere of influence that you have to bring that change. And that's something that came down to me from here. And changing mindsets. I mean, so the problem has been that for the last 50 years, maximally, I would say, or let's say from post the Second World War, we have been fed a narrative that more is better in terms of consumption. We've been fed this narrative, like, buy more, use more, spend more. You remember a famous statement after 2001, 9/11, go shop. That's what the president said, go shop, or we are tanking, right? So that has been fed into our system, that consumption is part of our culture. But that was a man-made in the United States post-World War II. You can go back and look at the literature on that. And we bought into the narrative. But since it's man-made, I always argue that we as human beings can create a different future for ourselves. And by now, we should be realizing that more is not necessarily better. That, in fact, sometimes less is more, right? So that mindset shift is absolutely essential if we have to move beyond business, because business is only one part. The whole consumer, the whole everybody who's us, basically, if we individually don't change, then collectively we will not be able to make the difference. Business alone will not be able to do it. Consumers will have to step up and change their behavior. And that's something we heard as well, coming down, kind of, the behavioral change that's taking place. But it starts with that mindset shift, right? That this is a new reality. I think I think the days of putting that logo on your website and saying, yes, now we are sustainable, I've seen that happen.
Yeah, CB, I want to make sure we have time for Q&A.
So what the center does, so I direct the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. And what it does is it works with companies on strategic issues, kind of, how do we talk to our customers about sustainability? We don't know. How do we talk to our investors about what we do in the sustainability sphere? A lot of companies struggle with these kinds of questions. What is purpose? Why should we have a purpose? Is diversity, equity, and inclusion a part of sustainability? How so? ESG, we heard of ESG, so what should we disclose? How should we disclose? What should we measure? How should we measure? So all of these questions we are dealing with at the center, and Pitt, Ohio, and Chuck Hamill was the first person who actually signed up, who believed in the value proposition that I was proposing, and he said, yeah, we'll. So we have 10 sponsors, big ones like IBM, NL, a very large electric utility company, BASF's a founding sponsor, PPG, but then we also have utilities, People's Natural Gas, Consol Energy. They want to learn, and we curate meetings for them. So please, and I want to give one shout out to the brand new associate director that the center has hired, Chris Gassman. Take a bow. And if Chris has an MBA from Carnegie Mellon and a law degree from Pitt, so I'm passing on the reins to him. So, but please do talk to us if there's anything we can do to help. We will. And the last point I'll leave it at is kind of just please remember that small actions on the part of many can collectively make a big difference. And so I have a book by that name, which I forgot to bring with me, but Bill has interviewed me on the book.
You have. Your publisher's going to kill you,
The book
though.
is called Small Actions, Big Difference. I hope you take a look. And I'm sorry, I hope I didn't overstep.
No, that was great. And loved hearing about, what you're doing at Pitt, and we heard about what's happening at Duquesne, and it's fabulous that we have those kinds of resources here in our region to help businesses and all organizations navigate this space. I do want to open it up for some Q&A. Grant, I'm going to let you, you've been listening to all of this too. I just wonder if there's anything you'd like to ask the panelists, and then we'll have a roving microphone if anybody out there would like to ask them something.
Yeah, one thing I was just writing down some notes for some of my own remarks, and I'm going to just kind of lead with this question: is that we're all consumers, and what are some of the things that you are all doing within your organizations to help drive your changes in consumption? So whether that is, we all have buying power, right? And CB just talked about it, and President Bush's remarks back in 2001 came off as trite, but were also powerful in a sense of we need to find ways in which to get the economy running again. so we have these powers of making choices. What are some of the ways that you guys are driving those choices within your institutions or organizations?
Okay, so this will be a lightning round. It's about 30 seconds each. Justine, I'm going to start with you and go down the line that way.
Yeah, so when we look at materiality, to be honest, like the procurement side has not been a priority yet, but we just hired a new director of procurement, and we've had a conversation, and it's so great because it's something that he's interested in. And so I'm hoping over the next 12 months, we'll start figuring out, like, how do we reach out to our vendors? How do we start, again, accumulating that data so we can even understand where are we at currently?
Greg, how about you?
I think efficiency in our decision making and how we work in the marketplace, and also how we're advising our clients to take action, just to understand what's their most efficient ways to manage their cost in sustainability to get to their end goal and their long-term investment.
Jana, what works in your space?
What we do and what we do with our clients a lot is the sustainable procurement, what Justine mentioned, trying to, ourselves and encouraging others to buy from local minority women-owned businesses, really trying to support your local economy and your local communities.
Elizabeth?
We also hired a new chief officer of procurement and supply chain, driving a lot of those initiatives. And I think just the choice that we want to become experts in this area of, how do we use energy and use less of it, even though it's counterintuitive to a business model of a utility, but knowing the future ahead. So.
Yeah, I want to hear from our two professors what they've seen that works. Dr. Schreiber.
I like setting big goals. Think really big. Think about how many countries are signing up to be carbon neutral, how many corporations are doing this. But big goals can actually be zero emissions, net zero energy, those types of things, but think really big. So I want to put people out in the world that have the power, as Grant was talking about, to think big and to think about what that really means for their job, for their company, for this city, for this region, and to think bigger than we've ever thought before, because incrementally we'll get there, and it is one decision at a time, the city was talking about, but it's also an opportunity for us to think really big about what this future could be.
Yeah, when we did our 75th anniversary planning process at the Allegheny conference a couple of years ago, our next 75, what everybody who was participating told us was, we want a moonshot. That's what we as a community want us to come up with. How about from your perspective, Stevie?
So one of the concrete things that we did actually at Pitt is we held workshop sessions on how to use sustainability as a purchasing criteria. So we did it with all the buyers who are buying, and the university buys quite a bit of stuff. So how do you put, and not just environmental, but we also did workshops on how to include diversity as a criteria, to support Black-owned businesses in Pittsburgh, and how to actually bring that onto the radar of buying. And I think that's, it's very concrete, it's very tangible, and it's ultimately helpful.
Excellent. We probably have time for 2 questions from the audience. If anybody has one, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone around. Anybody? Yep, right there in the back. All right.
It was good to hear your positive input today, this morning. I am curious about your immediate one year ahead bottlenecks that you see in your different areas.
Okay, and not everybody has to answer, but if you do have a thought about, a bottleneck, the bottlenecks you see, please just, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm super excited that I have the, the university professors up here right now, because it's growth and demand for skills and sustainability. People with the academic background, the understanding of everything from materiality through, reporting, how you tie it to your business, how you realize the business value. So, the MBAs and sustainability, that having that kind of resource and access to resources is vitally important, obviously in my business, but in my clients' companies as well. So this is really an area of growth right now. So anybody who can bridge that gap and come with those skills is already a step ahead.
Anybody else, Doctor?
I see grant as our bottleneck, actually, right? We need more grants in the
Oh,
world.
grant's the bottleneck, or the lack of
Is the
grants?
bottleneck.
We need more grants.
Yeah, it's one person, right? We need more grants. We need to multiply grant and grants, then to back that up with actual funding. But then we need more of him inside all of your organizations too, and more Justines and more others just like them to fill a role and to connect others within organizations to get beyond those bottlenecks, because no one's been in that role before.
Anybody else on bottleneck, CB? And then I'll go to Greg.
I think we need sustainability education in middle school. When someone is 11 or 12 years old, these concepts that we are discussing right now are not that complicated, but if they get that, input at that time, we will create, many more such forums of people who will want to participate.
Greg, you wanted to
I
add?
was going to say the exact same thing.
Oh.
Education and awareness of what people can do, the actions that they can take from an individual level up to a corporate level, and then the funding, the grants, to make it available, make it happen.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that difficult. That wasting less is probably good for all of us in our society, and that means wasting less in resources and wasting less in people who don't have an opportunity to participate. To me, it's a very simple lesson, and you're right. The younger we can get to kids, the better. Maybe one more question from the audience, if anybody has one. Yeah, right down in front here. All right.
That's good for her.
This may seem like a strange question, but there is an aesthetic problem with what we're trying to do. People are still objecting to having solar on their roofs. They're concerned about their real estate values. We're not, at this point, really proud. We are proud in Pittsburgh of our convention center, and it's green. But if you think about it, it was designed so that you're not really aware of it being a green building. We're not at the point yet where it is a badge of honor that I have solar on the front of my roof. How do you think we can get there?
Yeah, anybody want to take that one on? Yeah. Greg? Yeah, kind of your space.
Well, I think here again, I think it goes back to the statement just a minute ago: education and awareness of the importance of the initiatives that we have to take. A lot of times when you get into something new technology, there is the resistance to change, and Western Pennsylvania is very steeped in that tradition. And so it's a matter of just people being aware of what we can do. Yes, are there new technologies out that'll make the aesthetic question help answer that issue as time moves forward? But I mean, we've seen changes in style and architecture throughout our lifetimes, and solar on top of roofs is just another change in architecture, and the change in our beliefs of how we should live and how a property should look. So it's just awareness and education of and accepting that.
I also think it might be we have a new generation of home buyers, and I see them, I'm not in that generation, but I see them having an interest in having those kinds of amenities over and above other kinds of amenities. Look at the whole tiny house movement from, just even a few years ago, and this idea of living smaller. So there may just be, as the market changes, maybe the perception of aesthetics will change.
Yeah, I can try to add to that too, and it's a great question because it creates a conversation. And the more conversations we have about this, the more everybody else can get it. Because I have 2 systems on my home, I generate my electricity 40% cheaper than my utility company, and I can offload that in a net positive home, generating more than I need to then power a car. I can drive that car 10,000 miles a year for less than $175. Maybe those will be the things that convince others that, hey, this is worthwhile. And when they actually see it on the home, that means that there's a 25% greater chance that everybody else in the neighborhood will actually get it on their home too. So just one person and one conversation and then a visual can be the catalyst for others to really get it.
Excellent.
So great question.
Thank you all so much. Thanks to everybody for your questions. I'm going to turn things back over to Grant now to wrap things up, and I'm actually going to do it by prefacing his closing remarks with a question. And what we've been told by this panel is that what our region really needs is more grants. What is going to happen to our region with a change of administrations as we move into next year, and how do you see the city's leadership and its role and your role as we move forward to that moment? So with that, I'll turn things over to Dan to wrap things up.
What'd you do? Did you save the fastball for the end? All these underhand pitches, and then all of a sudden. No, I appreciate that, Bill, and I appreciate everyone. I'm going to be reflective, and then I'm going to be give a little bit of future think with that question. But I'm going to start with your question, come to your question at the end. A little anecdote. We just encountered your question in a real life scenario a couple weeks ago, where we have set broad, large targets and goals for net zero ambitions for all city facilities. And the issue came up around the firehouse number 8. Does anybody know where firehouse number 8 is? So you're along probably about 99.9% of Pittsburgh. So Firehouse 8 sits across from the McDonald's in East Liberty Circle, and not by any intent of anybody, it became our first test case in our net zero energy policy. Fast forward, it was denied. The design was denied by our art commission, who has purview over all development in the public realm, because they did not like the proposed insulation and cladding that would have gotten the building to an EUI, this is total energy speak, an energy use intensity of 20. So would have dropped the energy consumption for the building by about 90%, would have reduced our operating cost by about the same amount. And this is a large limestone building that has air conditions hanging out of it, has fire trucks and garage doors, but it was not aesthetically pleasing. As a sustainability director, you can imagine that I was incensed by this. And drove around East Liberty Circle, walked 3 miles from my house to East Liberty Circle to look at this building that I've been passed around 1,000 times at least, and understanding why did they oppose this building. And after I was able to bring down my blood pressure and understand the challenge is that we have a generational challenge, which is Justine's point, that we are up against. That aesthetics are important and need to be incorporated into design. The community's consent needs to be considered in the incorporation of any building that is in the public realm. And as a result, we all need to educate ourselves more throughout the process of how do we get to not just an EUI of 20 and a building that provides programming for a safe environment for our police and firemen and women, but also engages the community. And so with that, it came up to me this idea that we need to be able to drill down to draw down, which is, if you're familiar with the book Drawdown, which is just like CB's book, and it's on my bookshelf, has highlighted, dog-eared, it's folded, read this, tags and everything. And in order for us to draw down, we have to be able to educate one another and bring everybody along through the process. And the reason is that we have a moral responsibility to us and our future generations to get to the EUI of 20, but to do it in an inclusive and in a just way. And that's a process. And so that's really what this is all about, is how do we kind of build that process so that we can continue to educate, because sustainability is not an endpoint. It is a journey and a destination. So that's that question. And so the second piece is about this mindset shift. This started, and I was telling this story before the event to Chris actually, this whole event started as a result of a conflict. So I was going to be the first sustainability director to cancel Earth Day. And the reason was that there was a conflict over a permit. And there was some different factions who wanted a permit for a space, And I went in with folks remember Guy Costa, our former Public Works and Operations Director. And I said, guys, like, we just need to cancel. And he's like, I'm for it. Old school guy, he's like, yeah, it's just one less thing for us to do and to worry about. And I met Rhonda. And after the meeting, I said, we need to think about this in a more holistic way. That this is not just about a permit, this is about a process and a journey. And so what you've seen as a result of that is not just a beautiful looking program, but the expansion of the number of people and corporations that are participating in this process. And that's a testament of this ecosystem that we're developing here. And that is what is amazing. Bill talked about, thinking about to World Environment Day and hosting the G20 and kind of this trajectory and these building blocks that we're on that we never would have imagined would have happened had we not set the targets and goals of where we're going to be. And so a couple of things with regards to that in the future. Robert talked about, and CB and I were just talking with one another, little over a year ago, we set the course with regards to the moonshot, which is the idea of creating a Marshall Plan for Middle America. And so that concept was rooted in a couple of key things. One is that we are on this trajectory, and this is our moment, not just as Pittsburgh, but as a region, that we are a part of a larger ecosystem throughout the Ohio Valley and Upper Appalachia, that really it is our moment. It is our moment because we know what it is like to transition from the past to a future. And what we've learned in our time under Mayor Peduto's leadership is that we're not alone as communities that need to learn how to transition. And so that's what's really fascinating. That's why people look to Pittsburgh, not because we have great numbers, not because that we're doing fabulous things. It's all of those things packaged together, and that we are able to do this. So people look to Pittsburgh as a beacon of hope, because if you can do it in Pittsburgh, you can do it anywhere. And so the vision of the Marshall Plan is to start to set that moonshot, that opportunity where we can lead a just and equitable transition throughout the Ohio Valley that transcends itself across the world. And so that has two purposes. One, to have the fundamental investment, the financial component, but also the human component. It's about investing in our people and our place to help make these things possible, which leads us to one of the what's next. So as you know, my boss lost a recent election, which is going to encourage a new transition and a new moment in Pittsburgh. And so it's our responsibility to not just continue to kind of carry on that vision to the next administration, but also to start the markers further down the field so we can throw the ball deeper. And so it's been an interesting couple weeks for me, because you go through these various stages of grief. And just like a sports loss, I've been equating this a little bit for your hockey fans, and it came too quick and too soon, but this was like the '93 Penguins for me. So we had an amazing team in City Hall that I've had the pleasure and fortune to work with, an amazing coach, a network of fans and supporters around us, and then sometimes you just get chips in the ice. And sometimes the pucks don't bounce your way, and you get a guy named David Volek who scores a goal on you, and you're like, oh, wow, how'd that happen? But you learn from it. And so one of the things that we had the opportunity to do in the last couple of weeks is have two conversations with the White House. One, the president called the mayor directly, and which is an amazing experience, I think, in terms of the empathy of the president, but also a testament to kind of the work that we've done here in Pittsburgh. And that led to a follow-up conversation with Gina McCarthy. And I'm sharing with you guys as friends, because Gina is the climate envoy for the White House. So you have John Kerry, who does the international stuff, and then Gina does the domestic work. And her message to us was twofold. One, we want to help support the region. We want to help support the Marshall Plan, and we're looking to make major investments into the region to help make you and your ecosystem make things possible. So that's one that's super exciting. The second thing, which is another kind of moonshot for us, and I know that I'm on a camera here, but I'm sharing this in confidence, because it's not so confidence, is that the mayor said, Gina, we want to host COP. And for those of you in the climate space, COP is the Congress of Parties, or the UN Climate Summit. And so we've been very involved, from Paris, which was the first time that cities had been involved in climate discussions. And so we've put it out there that we want to host the UN Climate Summit sometime in the near future here in Pittsburgh, which would be a fundamental transition and an opportunity for us to not just showcase, but just like what happened for the G20, and I remember the Regional Enterprise Tower, how all of a sudden it looked all spiffy, right? But it gives us an opportunity to drive the conversation forward. And so as we put these markers in the ground, let's set our sights high, because we can make things happen here, and we've demonstrated that. So thank you all for your contributions. Thank you guys for being great components of a wonderful audience here today. And so let's go make things happen. But one thing I want to leave you with. This is our first day together, and I want you to think back when you walk out the door today about what it was like in April and May of last year. From an environmental standpoint, I want you to think about the ability to smell, the ability to hear, and how the air was cleaner, and you were able to be an experience in the environment. And that was because our footprint was reduced. Everybody saw the pictures of pollution maps and the canals of Venice and how they were clean, and you could see fish again, and you could see birds. We had a bear in my neighborhood. I live in Morningside. Somebody said, "Did a bear get out of the zoo?" I was like, "No, we don't have brown bears in the zoo." That's and so we started to connect again with nature. And that is something that we all need to be conscious of, I think, as we move forward and we kind of re-engage in the world around us, is that we all leave a footprint. And so let's make that footprint be light, but have our impact be bold. And so with that, thank you, everybody, and let's have a great day.